She had always been quiet, the kind of person who stayed in the corners of rooms, listening more than speaking. There was a softness about her that people often mistook for weakness. She worked at a small cafe in a busy part of the city. The cafe was always crowded, the air filled with the smell of coffee and baked goods. The hum of conversation, the clatter of dishes. Music sometimes played in the background, soft tunes that no one paid much attention to. But for her, music was more than background noise. It was a refuge. Her love for music had begun when she was very young. She had found an old keyboard in her attic, dusty and out of tune, but it felt like magic under her fingers. Every evening after finishing chores and homework, she would sit on the small stool and press the keys, letting the sounds fill her small room. Her family was not wealthy, and they never encouraged her to pursue music seriously. They told her it was a dream that would not bring food to the table, that she should focus on practical work, but she could not stop herself. Music was a language she understood better than words. At the cafe, she worked long hours, washing dishes, serving customers, cleaning tables, sometimes helping the manager with deliveries. The work was tiring, and she often felt invisible among the bustling crowd. Her coworkers noticed her quiet nature and simple appearance. She wore plain clothes, often patched or worn at the edges. Her hair was usually tied back simply, her hands rough from work. Some of the other staff teased her, laughing quietly when she passed by, whispering jokes she could hear but could not respond to. Despite this, she carried her love for music with her wherever she went. She would hum softly when she worked, a tune that no one could name but that carried her through the long days. At night, she would play on her small, second-hand keyboard, her fingers moving carefully, practicing scales and songs she had learned from books and online videos. The notes were not perfect, and sometimes she would play a wrong key and frown, but she never stopped. Music gave her a sense of control, a feeling that in that small world, she mattered. One evening, after the cafe had closed, she stayed behind to clean the floors. The manager had left, and the last few customers had gone. She took out her little keyboard, set it on the counter, and began to play softly. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. For a few moments, she forgot the world outside, forgot the tiredness in her arms and legs, forgot the whispers of ridicule that followed her all day. In those moments, she was free. But life outside the cafe was not always kind. People often judged her for being different, for her quiet demeanor, for her old worn keyboard that had seen better days. At work, some of the younger staff would mimic her, pretending to play piano while laughing, making jokes about her dreams. Customers sometimes made offhand remarks, asking if she played in school or suggesting that she should find a more practical job. Each comment was a small cut, a reminder that her passion was not understood or appreciated. Even so, she persisted. She had learned early on that dreams were fragile and easily crushed by the opinions of others. She kept her music close to her heart, a secret that only she truly understood. When she played, she poured everything into the notes, the frustration of being unseen, the quiet longing for acceptance, the tiny sparks of hope that maybe one day someone would notice her talent. Her evenings were filled with practice. She would stay up late into the night, her small room illuminated by the dim glow of a single lamp. She had memorized pieces from famous composers and simple melodies she heard on the radio. She experimented with creating her own songs, finding ways to express emotions she could not put into words. Each day, she grew a little more confident, even if the world around her remained dismissive. One particular evening, she played a piece she had been practicing for weeks. It was a complex arrangement, full of fast runs and delicate pauses. As her fingers moved over the keys, she felt a surge of joy and pride. She knew she was improving, that her dedication was paying off. But just as she reached the final chord, a sound from the hallway startled her, a knock on the door. She froze, her hands hovering above the keys. It was one of the cafe staff, passing by to collect something they had forgotten. They saw her playing and laughed, making a sarcastic comment about her fancy concert. She felt a familiar sting of embarrassment, her cheeks heating up. She quickly packed up the keyboard and muttered a quiet excuse, retreating to her small corner. The laughter followed her, but she refused to let it stop her. She reminded herself that her music was hers alone, not theirs to judge. Over time, she learned to navigate the ridicule with quiet resilience. She would smile politely at teasing remarks, never giving the satisfaction of a reaction. At work, she carried herself with a calm dignity, moving through the tasks with steady hands and a quiet determination. Her coworkers continued to whisper and joke, but she had learned that their opinions did not define her in her solitude. She discovered a small community online, people who shared videos of themselves playing piano, sharing tips, and encouraging one another. She began to post short clips of her practice sessions, her fingers trembling as she recorded herself. The first few videos had few views, but the comments she received were kind, supportive, and uplifting. For the first time, she felt a tiny spark of validation, a hint that maybe her talent was worth sharing. She also began to dream more boldly. She imagined herself performing in front of an audience, feeling the thrill of playing for people who would truly listen. She imagined the sound of applause, the warmth of recognition. These dreams were fragile, easily broken by the harsh reality of her daily life, but she held on to them tightly. They gave her a reason to keep practicing, to keep believing in herself even when no one else did. Her family remained skeptical. They reminded her that music could not pay bills, and that she should focus on work that mattered. She listened politely, but did not give up. She had learned that her passion was not something she could abandon, even under pressure. Music was not a hobby, was a part of who she was. Each note she played was a declaration that she existed. Her voice mattered even if it went unheard. As weeks turned into months, she continued her routine. Work during the day, practice at night. Small victories, like mastering a difficult passage or receiving a kind comment online, became milestones that she cherished. She found ways to improve without anyone noticing, sneaking time on borrowed keyboards at community centers, watching tutorials late at night, and experimenting with different styles of music. Each day, she became more skilled, more confident, more determined to prove, first to herself and then to the world, that her love for piano was real and powerful, even in the cafe. Small moments of recognition began to appear. A few customers noticed her humming and asked if she played. She would shyly nod, playing short tunes when there was a quiet moment. Their smiles encouraged her, even if the staff continued to tease. She realized that the world was not entirely against her. There were people who could see beauty even in small, quiet acts. One rainy evening, she sat by the window of the cafe, her small keyboard beside her. She pressed a key, then another, and a melody filled the room. The sound mingled with the patter of rain on the glass, creating a moment of magic. A customer paused, listening. Another customer leaned closer, nodding with a smile. She played on, letting the music flow freely, losing herself in the rhythm and harmony. For a brief moment, the whispers of ridicule faded, placed by the quiet acknowledgement of those who could feel the music. That night, she went home with a heart a little lighter, a mind a little freer. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, that mockery and doubt would not disappear overnight. But she also knew that music had given her strength, a way to survive and grow despite the challenges. She had learned to embrace her passion quietly, fiercely, and without apology. And she held on to the hope that one day the world would stop laughing and start listening. Her past was full of memories that made her feel small and unsure, even as she tried to appear calm in the present. She remembered the early days of school when she had first discovered her love for music. There had been a piano in the school auditorium, old and slightly out of tune, but it was enough for her to fall in love with the sound. She would stay after class asking the music teacher if she could practice, fingers trembling as she tried to follow the notes. The other children often laughed at her. They said she was too slow, too clumsy, that music was not for someone like her. Those words, repeated over and over, had shaped her, leaving tiny cracks of doubt that she carried even now. Her family had been practical and stern. They worried about survival and responsibilities rather than dreams. Her parents had encouraged her to focus on school, to aim for a job that would bring steady income. When she tried to explain how much music meant to her, they would nod politely but never offer real support. They saw it as a pastime, not a future. Her older siblings teased her gently but often, saying she should be more like everyone else. It hurt, but she learned to hide her pain behind a small smile and quiet determination. Music became her secret world, a place where she could be herself without judgment. There were afternoons when she would sneak to the school auditorium, waiting until the halls were empty, then run her fingers over the worn keys. She remembered one day vividly when a group of older students walked in. They stared, smirked, and one of them tapped the piano loudly, breaking the melody she had been playing. They laughed at her attempt, calling her a dreamer who would never succeed. She ran out of the room, tears blurring her vision, but even as she cried, she knew she could not give up. The piano had a way of calling her back, making her forget the harsh words. When she grew older, she found ways to keep practicing, despite the lack of formal lessons. She saved money from odd jobs to buy secondhand music books and small instruments. Each new song she learned was a victory, proof that she could achieve something on her own. Online tutorials became her teachers, and slowly her skills improved. She discovered that discipline and patience could take her further than talent alone. It was not easy, and sometimes she felt lonely. But she learned to cherish the quiet moments where she could play freely. Her love for music also taught her to notice details others overlooked. She would listen to the wind, the rain, the hum of the city, and imagine how each sound could be a part of a song. She began to experiment, creating small pieces that reflected her life, the struggles, the little joys, the moments of hope that kept her moving forward. Music became more than a hobby. It was her voice when words failed, her companion when the world seemed cold. Despite her progress, fear never left her entirely. She still remembered the sting of ridicule from childhood and the quiet discouragement of her family. These memories made her hesitate, even in moments where she had a chance to shine. She avoided performing in public, afraid that her mistakes would become the subject of laughter. Even when someone complimented her skills online, a small voice inside warned her not to get her hopes up. The contrast between her talent and the world's indifference was always present. A quiet tension she learned to live with. Sometimes she would catch herself, imagining what it would be like to perform in front of people who truly listened. She pictured herself sitting at a grand piano, the lights shining softly on her, the audience completely silent as her fingers danced over the keys. In those fantasies, she felt powerful and seen, the applause a warm recognition that she had always longed for. These daydreams were bittersweet, reminding her both of what she wished for and what had always seemed just out of reach. Her nights were devoted to practice. She would set up her small keyboard in the corner of her room, the only light coming from a single lamp. She practiced scales until her fingers ached, learning pieces from videos and books, trying to replicate the skill of musicians she admired. Mistakes were frequent, but she learned to correct them patiently, understanding that growth came from persistence. Each evening, the room would fill with the sound of her dedication, a testament to her unspoken commitment to music. She also discovered that music could bring comfort beyond herself. Occasionally, neighbors or friends would hear her playing and stop to listen, leaving small notes of encouragement. A neighbor once knocked on her door to say that a particular song had reminded them of happy memories. These moments were fleeting, but they reminded her that music could touch others, even in small ways. She began to hope quietly that one day her music would reach more people, that it could convey the emotions she struggled to express in words. Her work at the cafe continued to be challenging. Some staff members were unkind, teasing her, questioning her abilities, or making fun of her old keyboard. Customers were sometimes impatient, dismissive, or indifferent. But she carried herself with quiet dignity, never allowing the mockery to dictate her mood. She had learned to protect herself emotionally, understanding that their opinions did not reflect her worth or her potential. One afternoon, while cleaning tables, she noticed a small piano tucked into the corner of a community center across the street. It was old, but it seemed to call out to her. She imagined herself sitting there, playing for people who might listen, even for a short while. The thought filled her with both excitement and fear. What if she failed? What if people laughed? The memories of childhood ridicule rose to the surface, threatening to crush her courage. But then she remembered the moments of joy when she played alone. The small victories she had earned through months of practice, With a deep breath, she promised herself that she would try. She began visiting the community center in the evenings, carefully avoiding the busy times. She would sit at the piano, fingers trembling, and play quietly, letting the music fill the empty room. Each session was a challenge, not just technically, but emotionally. She had to face the lingering fear of judgment and the ingrained doubt from years of discouragement. But with every note, she felt a little stronger, a little more confident. The piano became her sanctuary beyond the walls of her own home. Slowly, she started to notice subtle changes in herself. Her hands were steadier, her timing more precise, her confidence growing. She began to experiment with small variations in rhythm and tone, learning to express emotion more clearly through the music. Her pieces became more personal, reflecting the complex mix of fear, hope, and determination that defined her life. She realized that every struggle she had endured, every laugh at her expense, had shaped her into a musician with a unique voice. Even in solitude, she found connections. She would leave short messages for others on online music forums, sharing her progress and encouraging others who were struggling. She discovered that many people faced similar doubts and ridicule, and that music could be a shared language of perseverance. The encouragement she offered to others reflected back, giving her a sense of purpose beyond her own practice. One evening, after a long day at the cafe, she returned to the community center and sat at the piano. The room was empty, the lights casting soft shadows. She closed her eyes and began to play, letting the music carry all her memories, the teasing, the doubts, the lonely hours of practice, and the small moments of encouragement. The sound was richer now, fuller, and more expressive. For the first time, she felt that she was truly communicating, that her emotions were audible in every note. As she finished the piece, she noticed a small group of people had gathered outside the window, watching quietly. They did not applaud yet, but their presence was enough to make her heart race. She realized that her music had reached others without her even trying to perform publicly. The thought filled her with a mixture of pride and nervousness. She understood in that moment that her journey was only beginning. The ridicule of the past no longer defined her. Instead, it had shaped her into someone capable of resilience, determination, and quiet brilliance. She left the community center that night with a sense of cautious hope. She knew there would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and people who would not understand. But she also knew that music had given her strength beyond measure. It had taught her patience, discipline, and the courage to dream quietly, persistently, and without apology. Her past, filled with doubt and ridicule, had not destroyed her. It had prepared her for something greater, a moment when her music might finally be heard and appreciated by those who truly listened. One ordinary afternoon, the cafe where she worked was busier than usual. Orders came in quickly, dishes piled up, and her coworkers hurried back and forth, exchanging hurried words and occasional complaints. She moved through the tasks with steady hands, quietly fulfilling her duties. The hum of conversation and the clatter of dishes filled the air, blending into the usual backdrop of her life. Music was absent this day, except for the small hum she kept in her mind as she worked. She kept her focus, knowing that she would return home later and let herself lose in her keyboard and melodies. A ill incident changed everything that day. The cafe had planned a small live performance in the evening. A local musician was scheduled to play for a few hours while customers enjoyed their drinks, but the musician called to cancel at the last moment. The manager, frustrated and unsure what to do, asked around. Her coworkers laughed quietly when he mentioned her, suggesting jokingly that she could fill in. She froze at the thought. She had never performed in front of a crowd, only practiced privately. The idea of playing in public made her stomach twist with nerves. The manager looked at her seriously, explaining that there was no one else available. He encouraged her to try, saying that even a short performance would be appreciated. Her hands shook slightly, but she felt a small spark of determination. She had spent years preparing herself for moments like this, even if she had never imagined it would come so suddenly. She agreed quietly, unsure of what would happen, but feeling that she could not refuse. As she moved toward the small stage area, her coworkers exchanged smirks, some whispering jokes. The customers, busy with their drinks and conversations, did not yet notice the change. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Her fingers hovered above the keys of the piano provided for the cafe, an old upright instrument that had seen better days. The wood was scratched, some of the keys were slightly sticky. But she reminded herself that music was about heart and skill, not perfection. She began slowly, pressing a few notes to test the sound. Her fingers were uncertain at first, trembling slightly as she tried to remember the practice she had done countless times alone in her room. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the music in her mind, recalling the countless hours she had spent learning, the melodies she had memorized, the emotions she wanted to express. She took another deep breath and began to play. The first few notes were quiet, almost hesitant. She could feel the eyes of a few curious customers turning toward her. Her coworkers were watching, some with disbelief, some with subtle amusement. She felt a flash of fear, remembering the laughter and ridicule she had endured over the years. But she kept playing. Each note grew steadier, each chord more confident. She let the music flow, pouring into it the years of practice, the moments of doubt, the hidden strength she had cultivated slowly. The room began to change. The chatter quieted as people noticed the sound of the piano. Conversations paused, and curious eyes turned toward her. She did not look up, focusing instead on the keys and the music that had become a part of her. She felt herself becoming immersed in the rhythm and melody, her nervousness fading as she connected with the piano. The notes told a story of struggle, of quiet perseverance, and of hope. Some customers were visibly surprised. They had expected a simple, short performance, perhaps something clumsy or incomplete. Instead, they heard skill and emotion that caught them off guard. Her fingers moved with confidence now, tracing the familiar patterns she had learned through years of private practice. She added small improvisations, variations that reflected her own style and feelings. Each chord resonated through the cafe, carrying a depth that drew people in. A few staff members stopped in their tracks, realizing that her talent was real. Their earlier smirks faded into silence as they watched her play. The laughter that had accompanied the suggestion of her performance now seemed distant, replaced by awe. Even the manager, who had initially been uncertain, stood quietly listening. The cafe had become a temporary hall of music, transformed by her playing. She felt herself growing bolder with each note. The fear that had gripped her at the beginning of the performance was replaced by a strange, exhilarating energy. She realized that this was the moment she had been preparing for, even if she had not known it would come in such a way. Music had given her courage, and now, standing in front of a small audience, she began to truly understand her own strength. The customers began to gather closer, drawn by the unexpected beauty of her playing. Some had never heard such expressive music from someone so unassuming. They leaned on tables, paused their conversations, and listened in quiet attention. She could feel their focus, their curiosity, and she played even more freely. The music told stories without words, stories of resilience, hope, and quiet determination. She was no longer playing for herself alone. She was sharing something universal, something that touched people's hearts. Time seemed to slow. The clock on the wall ticked, unnoticed by anyone in the room. She played piece after piece, moving through melodies she had memorized and adding small flourishes of her own creation. Each note carried emotion, each chord built upon the last. The cafe, once a place of ordinary routine, had become a place of connection. Where music bridged the gap between a quiet girl and the people around her, she felt a sense of liberation. For so long she had hidden, worried about judgment and ridicule. Now, in the face of a real audience, she realized that her fears had been outweighed by her passion. The piano had become a bridge, connecting her inner world to the outside. She had learned to trust herself, and in doing so, she discovered a power she had never fully acknowledged before. As she finished one of the pieces, a hush settled over the room. The notes lingered in the air, and for a moment no one moved or spoke. The silence was not empty. It was filled with the weight of what had just happened. People had been touched, surprised, and inspired by her playing. Even her coworkers, who had once mocked her quietly, now looked on with new respect, some with astonishment. It was a small but powerful transformation. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the cafe erupted into quiet applause. It started with a few claps, tentative and unsure, then grew louder as more people joined. She felt her chest swell with a mixture of relief and pride. She had faced her fears, performed without formal preparation, and shared the music that had been her companion for so many years. The standing of the cafe had shifted subtly. She was no longer invisible, no longer just a quiet girl in the corner. She had claimed a moment that belonged to her. A few customers approached her, praising her skill and expressing their amazement. Strangers smiled, complimented her playing, and asked where she had learned. She smiled shyly, grateful but still processing the whirlwind of emotions. Her manager, now clearly impressed, thanked her sincerely, noting that she had saved the evening and left a lasting impression on the cafe's patrons. For the first time, she realized that music could be more than a private solace. It could reach people, connect them, and transform ordinary moments into something extraordinary. The experience gave her a glimpse of what her future might hold, possibilities that she had previously only imagined. She understood that talent combined with courage could break barriers and surprise even those who had doubted her. That evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the cafe quieted once more, she sat alone for a moment, letting the music linger in her mind. She replayed the moments of the performance, the hesitant notes at the beginning, the growing confidence, the expressions on people's faces. She realized how far she had come, how much strength she had gained from years of practice, solitude, and perseverance. She left the cafe that night with a heart full of hope and a mind buzzing with possibilities. The unplanned moment had revealed something crucial. Her music mattered. Her voice could be heard, and she had the courage to step forward when opportunity presented itself. The ridicule and doubts of the past no longer held the same weight. They had shaped her, yes, but they had also prepared her for the moment when she could finally be seen, not just as a quiet girl, but as a musician with a story to tell through the piano. As she continued to play, the atmosphere in the cafe changed completely. The soft hum of conversation had disappeared, replaced by an intense focus on the music. Customers who had been chatting and checking their phones stopped mid-action, leaning forward, eyes wide, listening to every note. Some leaned on tables, resting their elbows, as if they could somehow absorb the emotion through their very bodies. She could feel their attention, and it gave her an energy she had never felt before. Each note she played now seemed to carry more weight, more meaning. The initial hesitation she had felt melted away entirely. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried by the melody. Her fingers moved faster and more confidently over the keys. She added subtle improvisations, delicate flourishes, small ornaments that made the music uniquely hers. The piano, though old and imperfect, responded beautifully to her touch. Each chord resonated in the small room, bouncing off the walls and filling the hearts of those present with awe. A few customers whispered to each other in astonishment. Some could not believe the skill coming from someone they had never noticed before. Others sat silently, tears threatening to fall as the music seemed to express feelings they had long carried but never spoken. She did not see their faces. She was too immersed in her own connection with the piano, but she could sense the shift. The laughter and ridicule of her past seemed distant now, powerless against the beauty of the present moment. Her coworkers, who had once mocked her quietly, watched in stunned silence. Some of them held their hands over their mouths, unable to form words. The manager standing nearby felt a mix of surprise and admiration. This was no ordinary performance, it was a revelation. They had never imagined that the quiet, unassuming girl they saw every day could create something so moving and full of life as she moved from one piece to another. The audience's expressions changed from surprise to wonder. Children in the cafe, who had been restless moments before, sat quietly on their chairs, eyes wide, absorbing every note. Adults paused their conversations entirely, some leaning on tables, some standing by the counter, mesmerized. The music seemed to tell a story without words, conveying emotions too deep for speech. It spoke of struggle, of hidden strength, of hope quietly nurtured for years. The initial shock of her playing soon grew into complete awe. People whispered to each other, asking how someone so young and quiet could play with such emotion and skill. Some had never considered the possibility that raw talent could be hidden behind a shy demeanor. Their assumptions about her had been shattered in a matter of minutes, replaced by admiration and deep respect. She felt herself growing bolder with each note, realizing that her music was finally being heard, finally being understood. Time seemed to bend around her playing. Minutes felt like seconds, and seconds stretched endlessly as she moved through her repertoire. She played songs she had memorized, small improvisations she had developed in her room, pieces she had crafted from her own emotions. The cafe had become a hall of music, alive with the sound that seemed to speak directly to the hearts of everyone present. She felt the connection between herself and the listeners, silent understanding that transcended words. At one point, a customer quietly raised their hand, and others followed. They were not interrupting. They were signaling appreciation, almost as if they could not contain their admiration. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the purity and honesty of her playing. She felt a wave of emotion herself, a mix of gratitude, relief, and exhilaration. All the years of private practice, all the ridicule and doubts, had led to this moment. She realized she had survived. She had grown. She had finally found a place where her talent could shine. The applause began gradually. One person clapped, then another, and soon the small cafe was filled with clapping and murmurs of amazement. People stood up, some leaning forward to get a better view, their eyes shining with newfound respect. She smiled slightly, feeling a warmth in her chest that was entirely new. This was more than recognition. It was validation, the realization that her music had the power to move people, to touch hearts, to inspire awe. Her coworkers' expressions had completely changed. The smirks and whispers of mockery were gone, replaced with genuine amazement and respect. They could no longer dismiss her quietly or make jokes about her dreams. She had demonstrated something undeniable, something that transcended appearances and assumptions. The shy girl they had ignored had become the center of attention, a creator of beauty and emotion. As she finished one particularly challenging piece, a profound silence followed. The notes lingered in the air, and for a moment no one moved. The silence was heavy, almost sacred, as if the room itself were holding its breath in appreciation. Then, slowly, the applause returned, louder and more sustained than before. People cheered, some standing, some clapping wildly. She felt a rush of exhilaration and disbelief. She had done it. She had overcome fear, ridicule, and doubt. And she had shared her soul through the piano. A few customers approached her as the applause died down. They praised her skill, asked about her training, and expressed amazement at her talent. She listened politely, smiling shyly, still trying to process the overwhelming emotions of the performance. Her manager, now clearly impressed, thanked her repeatedly, acknowledging that she had transformed the cafe's atmosphere and created an unforgettable experience for the patrons. For the first time, she truly understood the power of music. It was more than a private solace or a skill practiced in isolation. It was a language that could reach people, connect them, and create moments of shared beauty. She realized that her years of dedication, perseverance, and quiet effort had prepared her for this moment, and that she was capable of achieving more than she had ever imagined. As the evening wound down, she packed up the piano area and stepped away from the stage. The customers slowly returned to their conversations, but the energy in the cafe had shifted. There was a lingering sense of awe and appreciation, subtle acknowledgement that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Her coworkers exchanged looks, some quietly nodding in respect, while others remained speechless, still processing the unexpected transformation of the quiet girl they had once. Underestimated, she left the cafe that night with a mixture of exhaustion and elation. Her heart raced with the memories of the performance, of the faces of people who had listened, and the applause that had filled the room. She walked home slowly, replaying the events in her mind, each note, each reaction, each fleeting moment of connection. The night air was cool against her skin, and the city lights seemed brighter, more alive. She felt a sense of possibility she had never experienced before. That night, she sat in her small room with her own keyboard. She reflected on what had happened. She realized that the ridicule of the past no longer held the same power. It had shaped her, yes, but it had also given her resilience, patience, and determination. She had faced fear, embraced an unplanned opportunity, emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of her potential. Music had carried her through years of doubt, and now it had carried her into recognition and respect. She closed her eyes and played softly for herself, letting the melodies soothe her. Reflect on the events and imagine the future. She understood that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, and more moments of fear and doubt. But she also knew that she had the courage, skill, and heart to face them. The applause and astonishment of the audience had shown her that she could touch lives with her music, that her voice mattered, and that she had the power to inspire and connect. The experience left a lasting impression on her. She no longer felt invisible or dismissed. She had claimed a moment of triumph and shared her gift with the world, even if only for a short time. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that music would continue to guide her, and that the path ahead, while uncertain, was filled with possibility. The quiet girl who had once been mocked had begun to emerge as a musician who could move hearts, break assumptions, and find her place in a world that had once overlooked her. After the unforgettable performance at the cafe, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The applause and astonishment of that evening stayed with her for days, a constant reminder that her music mattered. Each time she closed her eyes and thought of the faces of the audience, the excitement and warmth returned, filling her with renewed energy and purpose. She walked through her daily life with a quiet confidence, subtle glow that came from knowing she had finally been heard and appreciated. The next few days at the cafe were different. Customers who had been present during the performance returned, bringing friends and family, eager to witness her playing again. Some approached her politely, praising her talent and asking when she would play next. Even the co-workers who had once teased her treated her with a new respect, quietly complimenting her or offering small gestures of encouragement. It was not just recognition of skill, it was acknowledgement of the years of dedication and resilience that had brought her to this moment. She began to receive invitations to play at local events and small gatherings. At first, the thought was overwhelming. She had never imagined performing outside the cafe or in front of a wider audience. Fear of judgment and the memories of ridicule from her past still lingered. But she realized that she could not ignore the opportunities that were now presenting themselves. Slowly, she started accepting small performances, each one building her confidence and expanding her horizons. Her nights continued to be filled with practice. But now, there was a sense of purpose beyond private solace. She experimented with new compositions, explored different styles, and refined her skills with a growing awareness of how her music affected others. The joy of discovery and the thrill of connecting with an audience gave her a renewed sense of passion. She realized that her music could not only express her own emotions, but could also bring comfort, inspiration, and joy to others. One evening, after a performance at a small community event, she noticed the profound effect her music had on the audience. People approached her with gratitude in their eyes, telling her how her playing had moved them, made them remember lost memories, or simply brought them peace. Children whispered excitedly about the melodies. Adults smiled with quiet emotion, and a few older listeners admitted they had not expected to be touched so deeply. She listened to their words with humility, understanding that her music had become more than a personal refuge, had become a bridge between people, connecting hearts in ways she had never anticipated. Her family, who had once dismissed her passion, began to notice the changes as well. They observed her growing confidence, the sparkle in her eyes, and the subtle way she carried herself. Slowly, they began to offer quiet support. They would ask about her performances, listen to her practice sessions, and even help in small ways. While their understanding was still limited, it was a sign of progress, recognition that her dedication and talent could not be ignored. She also realized the importance of community and mentorship. She started to share her knowledge with others who were learning to play, offering guidance and encouragement. She remembered the isolation she had felt in her early years and wanted to provide support that she herself had lacked. Through this, she discovered a deeper satisfaction in music, not just in performing, but in fostering growth and confidence in others. The cycle of encouragement and inspiration became a source of fulfillment she had never anticipated. Opportunities continued to expand. She played at local schools, small concerts, and community events. Each performance brought new challenges, from technical difficulties with pianos to the nerves of playing in unfamiliar spaces. Yet, she faced them with patience and courage, understanding that each experience was a step forward in her journey. The applause, the smiles, the emotional responses from audiences reinforced her belief in the power of music and her role as a messenger of emotion. Despite the growing recognition, she remained humble and grounded. She never forgot the quiet hours of practice in her room, the ridicule she had endured, or the moments of doubt she had faced. These experiences shaped her character and deepened her connection to the music. She continued to play with honesty, emotion, and dedication, understanding that her greatest reward was not fame or accolades, but the ability to touch lives through her art. Her journey also taught her resilience beyond music. She became more confident in her interactions, more willing to speak up, and more open to embracing new experiences. The lessons learned from years of struggle, patience, persistence, and quiet determination translated into other areas of her life, giving her a sense of independence and strength she had never felt before. One memorable evening, she was invited to perform at a small cultural festival in the city. The audience was larger than she had ever faced, and the pressure was intense. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat at the grand piano, but she took a deep breath and began. The music flowed naturally, each note carrying her years of practice, struggle, and perseverance. The crowd was silent, completely absorbed in the performance. When she finished, the applause was overwhelming, the cheers sincere and filled with admiration. In that moment, she realized how far she had come from the quiet girl who had once been laughed at for dreaming of music. The experience changed her perspective on life. She no longer saw herself as invisible or limited by the opinions of others. She understood that her efforts, her dedication, and her willingness to take risks had created new possibilities. She had discovered a voice that could be heard, a talent that could inspire, and a courage that could overcome fear. The journey from ridicule to recognition had transformed her, not only as a musician, but as a person. She continued to compose new pieces, drawing inspiration from her experiences and the stories of those around her. Her music reflected a deep understanding of human emotion, hope, sorrow, joy, resilience, and connected with audiences in profound ways. People began to seek her performances not just for entertainment, but for the emotional journey her music offered. She had become more than a performer. She had become a storyteller, conveying the human experience through the language of piano in her personal life. She grew closer to people who appreciated and supported her. Friendships deepened, and new connections formed through shared experiences and mutual admiration for music. She understood the value of surrounding herself with those who encouraged growth and celebrated authenticity. The loneliness she had felt in her early years was replaced with community, belonging, and a sense of shared purpose. Through it all, she remained mindful of her beginnings, the quiet girl who practiced on a secondhand keyboard. The years of ridicule and the moments of self-doubt, she carried those memories as reminders of her resilience, using them to remain humble and focused. They grounded her, keeping her connected to the reasons she had started playing music in the first place: the joy of creation, the expression of emotion, and the connection to others.